webinar series. I'm Kathy Fitzmaurice from the Central Office, and I'll be your host for today's webinar, Introduction to Government Contracting. This is the first in the Procurement webinar series. Your microphones and telephones are currently muted to eliminate background noise during the program. We will take questions throughout the presentation. So to ask a question, if you have a working microphone, you can just jump in and ask, or if you're not self-muted, you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon and I will unmute you. Or if you do not have a working microphone, just type your question into the question box on your control panel and I'll read the question out loud for you. Today's program is being recorded and will be available through WebMQS in the Shared Resources section. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm pleased to introduce Roxanne Muchler, Director of our Mohawk Valley SBDC. Welcome, Roxanne.
Thank you, Kathy, and good morning, everyone. So glad that you could join us this morning. As Kathy said, this is the first in a series of 10 procurement webinars, and I just wanted to mention that if you take part in all of them, we will definitely want to recognize you at all staff training for that great achievement. So we'll be keeping track of your attendance. And if you did, by chance, not take part in a live webinar down the road, you can access it through MQS. Just let us know that you have taken that webinar after the live date. Okay, let's get started. We've got a lot to cover. What we're going to do first is talk about federal contracting and then move to state contracting after that at the end. But first, I sometimes will get a question on what does procurement mean. And procurement and acquisition sometimes are used interchangeably. On your screen, you're actually seeing the definition of acquisition that is taken right out of the Rulebook for government contracting, which is called the Federal Acquisition Regulation. So we'll be talking more about that in a moment. But basically what I tell people to make it simple is procurement, think purchasing. What does the government buy? We get this question an awful lot from clients because obviously they want to know if what they offer is something that the government would be interested in. And I always tell them the government buys everything from soup to nuts. What I did last week when I was home during the holidays, I actually wanted to try and find some unique contracts that had just recently been awarded, just to give you an idea of the scope of government contracts. You know, I usually tell people everything from paper clips to sophisticated radar systems. But when I was looking at recent awards I think it was last week, just wanted to give you some examples. There was a contract awarded December 31st for kosher cereal, the Department of Justice Bureau of Prisons. There was another one on the 29th of December for parenting education services, again by the Bureau of Prisons. That was a $90,000 contract. And then I'm waiting to hear from Carla out in Rochester or Brockport. There's a client, or I'm not sure if it's a client, I shouldn't say that. There's a company out in Rochester that just got an award for exterior window cleaning from the VA out in Pittsburgh. And it's a $29,000 award to a service-disabled, veteran-owned firm. So I'm just wondering if that by any chance is one of our SBDC clients. And lastly, another unique one was for a Catholic music director. So you can see that, you know, whether it be a product or a service, it really can be just about anything. Not all of your clients are going to be ready to do business with the federal government. It's definitely not something that a startup should pursue. We generally tell people at the very least, you know, a new company should wait at least a year, you know, before they even think about it. We do encourage clients to start out at the lower levels of contracting just to kind of get their feet wet. Maybe start with trying to sell to their local municipality, village, town, county, and then, you know, move up looking at state opportunities. But you can see here on your screen that these are absolute musts. You know, government at any level wants to see that a business is firmly established, that it has the infrastructure in place, that it's got the team of people to fulfill the contract, the financial capacity to fulfill the contract and then get paid for the contract. So these are just a few bullet points that you can share with clients that are definitely looked at. Certainly great computer skills. Everything has really over the last decade gone totally online. So like I said, we'll start out with federal contracting and then we'll finish up with state contracting and how to market to government agencies. So remember, this is an introductory webinar. What I'll do as we go through the different slides is let you know when there's a webinar scheduled to expand more on a specific topic. There's many people out there to help our clients and small businesses with government contracting. Here's just, a listing of some of them. The small business specialists, those are people employed by the government agencies themselves to assist small businesses. The small business liaison or small business liaison officer, that's a person employed by a prime contractor to assist small businesses because they definitely, want to do business with small businesses. They are required to in many cases. The Department of Defense has a staff of small business people, their Office of Small Business Programs. The SBDC procurement specialist, that's you, or hopefully you're looking to maybe get into procurement in a deeper way. So I thank you again for participating today and to expand your knowledge. The SBA does have procurement center representatives. And a lot of us, I know, do collaborate with our colleagues that work at the PTACs around the state. Just to update you on the scope of this market, the figures for fiscal year 2013 are in, and it's pretty much been flat. The government spending, for decades, the government spending increased every single year. And we have been seeing either a decrease or a flatlining of the government spending, but it is over $500 billion. And I don't have the figures yet for 2013 for New York, but we have been at $11.3 billion going back to fiscal year 2011, putting us at 13th overall in getting contracts countrywide. So I always tell people, at one time in New York's history, we were in the top 10. So we had slipped a little bit, and hopefully, as our economy improves, we'll get back into the top 10 at some point. These figures are from fedspending.org. And then I had to keep this in. This is a favorite slide of our former director, Dave Mallon, and a lot of people actually I've seen use this quote at procurement workshops. So it's still appropriate, even though it was said back in '62, it's still very appropriate today. The FAR is the standard by which every federal agency must follow. So as I said, this is the rule book. Think of it, if you will, as the Bible for procurement, because this has all the policies and the procedures that federal agencies must adhere to for procurements. So all federal agencies, except a very few, must comply with the FAR's regulations. This is something I've put here on this slide, some key sections that you might have an interest in, but couple websites there on your screen. Acquisition Central has many links. That's kind of all things procurement. And if you actually want to download the FAR, I've given you the website where you can download it in several different ways, be it a PDF or whatever. If you are really going to get into federal contracting and assisting clients with federal contracting, it's a good idea to download it and have it on your desktop. I always tease people that it's certainly not anything you're going to print at over 2,000 pages. It's certainly not something that we print out, but you might want to download it to have it readily accessible on your desktop. Many bidding opportunities will reference sections of the FAR. So they won't put what it says, but it's up to the client to go there and read that particular section. A section that I don't have here that was helpful to me when I started was, I think it's part 2. There's a whole section on definitions, which is a good resource if you're just getting going. Another website that helped me when I first started is this website that is actually for looking up acronyms. So you are going to see tons and tons of acronyms getting involved in government contracting. And sometimes, you know, you could get stuck if you don't know what it means. Sometimes they're not always defined. So this website, you can type in that acronym and it will bring up several different options for what the acronym means. So I don't use it so much anymore, but I used to use it pretty frequently. So I've put up here some acronyms. Those of you new to government contracting, I realize that they won't mean anything to you, but I don't know if anybody listening would know what POC stands for, or PCO. Anyone want to take a stab at that? Well, PCO is Principal Contracting Officer. They're the ones that administer a contract and terminate it. And the POC is a point of contact. So that's a very important person because that's who we many times will contact with questions. But a couple funny acronyms. CHAOS actually stands for Chief Has Arrived on the Scene. And that one that I won't even try and say stands for, it's a U.S. Navy acronym. You can see the NAV in there, and it stands for Commander Naval Sea Combat Systems Engineering Station. So I think that's the longest acronym I've ever seen in my history. A few years ago, a website was started, and it was called Govlish, and I get their newsletter once or twice a year. So those of you who are into acronyms, you might want to subscribe to their newsletter. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek sometimes, but some interesting information. So how does our client get started if they're interested in federal contracting? The first step is to register at a website called SAM, an acronym again for System for Award Management. And this is actually a required registration for our clients for any contract over what they call the micro-purchase level, over $3,000. They need to be registered at this website. So I've given you the website. Before they go there, what you see on your screen is the home page for it. The client first has to get a DUNS number, and they have to identify certain codes that apply to their business. So we actually have a webinar coming up on SAM, and it's scheduled right now for March 11. So if this is something that you're interested in, we'd love to have you take part in that webinar. The information that our clients enter in SAM is public information, so anybody is able to access it. And the only people that don't need to register in SAM, other than the people that do business at that micro-purchase level, subcontractors are not required to register because they're subcontracting to the prime, which that's the client that actually has the contract. But I still recommend that clients, if they're getting into subcontracting, I do recommend that they register as well. There's many, many ways to find contract opportunities, and this is what is so intimidating to clients, is they don't know where to begin, and I totally understand that. And so we're here to help them step by step in knowing what to do. And these are all of the different ways that we used to train up our clients. And we actually have a couple webinars coming up that go into detail We have a subcontracting opportunities webinar on April 1st, and we have a webinar, How to Find Federal Contracting Opportunities, on March 18 coming up. There is just an enormous amount of information that's available online for our clients, but you have to know how to find it and where to look. So that's what we'll be teaching you in those upcoming webinars, is how to actually, walk a client through. But basically, current opportunities, certainly, that's something that the client wants to look at. So they will want to monitor a website called FedBizOps, which is short for Federal Business Opportunities. And anything over $25,000 must be posted there.
Roxanne, I think we might have a question. John, your hand is raised. Do you have a question? If your microphone's on working, you can.
Maybe he could type it in if he's not able
Yeah,
to.
I guess, is anyone else having audio issues? John's saying it's on and off. No, I guess I don't see anyone else having an issue, so sorry, Roxanne.
Not a problem. If they're not able to, just maybe typing it in will be the answer. So FedBizOps, or FBO for short, that's the official site to find current contracting opportunities over $25,000. Now, BidLinks absolutely monitors Federal BizOps. So we always recommend that the client use BidLinks, because that's going to make it much, much easier for them, rather than having to monitor BidLinks and FedBizOps. They don't need to do both. Past awards are certainly something to look at. Who's gotten the contracts in the past? If they got a contract in the past, maybe there's an opportunity there to subcontract. But it's valuable information to find out who is getting the awards. Future opportunities. All agencies do have to post what is called an agency forecast, or a procurement forecast, which is just a heads up on what that agency expects to purchase in the coming year. Some of those are easier to review and read than others, but again, just something for someone who sets aside the time to do some research. It's something to look at. And then, of course, I've already mentioned subcontracting opportunities, which is a great, great way for somebody to really get started in contracting and get an understanding how everything works. Checking individual agency websites is another way to find postings that aren't required to be posted elsewhere, like at FedBizOps. And we always, always recommend networking. More on that later. Here is just a screenshot of that FedBizOps website and how to get to it. The only time I could ever really think of somebody actually going there is maybe if they wanted to set up an alert for, say, a woman-owned small business set-aside. That's not something that BidLinks can do. And then the Defense Logistics Agency, which is the troops support for our troops, you can also go right directly to their website as well. But again, that is monitored by BidLinks, so it isn't really necessary. But I mention it because over 75% of the U.S. dollars awarded are spent by the Department of Defense. So that DIBS site is very important. But this is really just scratching the surface on finding current opportunities. Once it's identified who buys what our client sells, then the client needs to market directly to that particular agency. So in the past, I've used the example where if you have a company that sells medical products, they certainly are going to want to market to the VA, the Veterans Administration, because the VA has, they've got hospitals, clinics, medical centers nationwide. I just added this slide recently because we're going to be talking about a couple of these ways to bid. And So I just wanted to define these. There's many, many other terms that we'll talk about in the future, but an invitation for bid, that's used when there's a bid opportunity for a commodity or a product, and the award is made to the bidder who bids the lowest price. So it's strictly based on price only. Same for request for quote. It's very similar to invitation for bid. And then the request for proposal, that is a little different. That's used in more technical situations, and price is not the only factor that's taken into consideration. So they'll look at other factors such as the firm's technical ability, past performance, just other factors like that, and they will make a contract award based on best value. Here are several websites for looking up past awards. Again, FedBizOpps. What I use quite a bit is the Federal Procurement Data System. I really like that website because I can get a report on who has received contract awards for a particular NAICS code, which is a federal code that describes a product or a service. USA Spending is all USA Spending, but some people do use that. And then BIDS does have a site where you can just look up awards only. That Federal Procurement Data System, that goes way, way back, so you can actually see history going back to the 80s and the 90s. And then for agency forecasts, the easiest way, you can find them at a particular agency's website, but this might be a quicker way to find them by going to that Acquisition Central website I mentioned earlier and then clicking on a particular agency. So what I do when I've looked one up, I bookmark it so that it's always accessible to me in the future. So that's for looking into the future, being proactive, thinking ahead. I'm always asked from time to time, what does it mean, what is a small business? And here you have the definition at the federal level, which is slightly different from the state, so we'll get to the state one in a minute. But at the federal level, independently owned and operated, not dominant in its field, and qualified as a small business under certain size standards. And it's the SBA that actually establishes those size standards, and they're based on the type of industry. And that size standard can be either number of employees or average annual receipts over 3 years. So right now, the SBA has been actually for the last probably more than a year now, been taking a look at its size standards and reevaluating them to better reflect the economy and the rise in inflation and all. So, but having said that, I will tell you that over 98% of businesses in the U.S. are small businesses. So you probably, all of you that are listening this morning, all of your clients most likely are small businesses. There are some programs out there at the federal level. There's the SBA's HubZone certification program, which HubZone, as you can see, is an acronym for Historically Underutilized Business Zone. And this is a program that the SBA administers and oversees. And I've put on the slide here what the criteria is. So SBC is small business concern. So the small business has to be located in a hub zone, and 35% of its employees have to live in a hub zone, but not necessarily the same hub zone as the business. So why go through this program to get this certification? Well, the advantage is that there are contracts that are set aside just for hub zone certified firms. So that's the advantage. There's also a price break. They call it a price evaluation preference. If the client is bidding against a large firm, so they get a 10% preference if they're bidding against a large business. So the hub zones, actually we've been losing a lot of our hub zone certified firms because we've lost a lot of hub zones here in New York State. However, I did get an email just the other day that there are some recently added new hub zones. I'll get that out as an update soon. But agencies are finding it very difficult to meet their goals to give contracts to hub zone firms because there just aren't as many as there used to be. So if you have clients that are located in a hub zone, this is something they could definitely consider pursuing. It could open up, a door for them. How do they find out if they're in a hub zone? They just go to the website that you see on your screen there, sba.gov/hubzone. There's a link to the maps. Another program that the SBA has is the 8A Business Development Program. And this is designed to help businesses that are considered socially and economically disadvantaged. So basically, it's a program for people who are in the minorities, the minority designations. There are some white people that can get this certification and go through this program, but they really have to show a lot of evidence of discrimination. So a business has to be in business for 2 years and be at a point where they can show potential for success. It has to be owned by a U.S. citizen, and it's a 9-year program where the SBA will assist them in getting contracts. So a lot of minority firms are interested in this program. I remember Jim Quackenbush always making the point when he did training on this that the timing for getting into this program is very important. Because it's only a 9-year program, business might want to wait till they're in business for 3-4 years or more to take full advantage of the advantages from being an 8A firm. So you can go to the website there for a lot of great information. And then there's also a Women-Owned Small Business Federal Contract Program. This just kicked in a couple years ago, and there are now contracts set aside strictly for women. And they're only for certain industry categories defined by, like I said, a NAICS code, which is that code that describes a business. But again, the business must be owned 51% or more by women. They must be U.S. citizens. They must control the day-to-day operations and be a small business as well. So there's also a new acronym as well, an economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business. There's contracts that are set aside for those types of businesses as well. So they have to meet certain economic criteria to be considered economically disadvantaged. But the criteria is so high that many of our clients do meet that those economic requirements. This is just a slide to kind of recap these what we call socioeconomic programs, which again, these are programs that are in place to help businesses get a bit of an edge in bidding on government contracts. So I'm always asked, who certifies, and so I've done a little table here to show you the small business. That there is no formal certification for that. Business just states that they're small. The women-owned small business, we just found out recently that for federal contracts, the women-owned small business is going to have to show a formal certification to receive that set-aside contract. We'll get more information on that in the days ahead, but it is looking like a state certification would suffice for that. I think many of us know that for women-owned businesses, they can get New York State certified through the Empire State Development's Minority and Women-Owned Business Development Division. We talked about 8A and HubZone being small business administration programs and certifications. And then lastly, there are set-aside contracts for veterans, actually for service-disabled veteran-owned businesses. And those types of businesses, again, 51% or more owned by a veteran and controlled day-to-day by the veteran. So the veteran can self-certify, or they can go through a formal process through the VA at the federal level. And there's now a new process at the state level as well. That's an acronym for the Division of Service Disabled Veterans Business Development, and this is through OGS, the Office of General Services. So the certification process for veterans is through a different New York State entity than for women. And I'm going to be talking actually to Amy soon. Amy Amoroso, our veteran advisor at the Albany SBDC, and would love to collaborate with her on a webinar regarding how to assist our veteran-owned businesses with certification. This is really just getting off the ground as we speak. There are government-wide goals for giving contracts to small businesses. These are the government-wide goals. Each agency does have its own set of goals that they are targeting to give a certain amount of their contracts to businesses. You can see here for small businesses in general, the goal is 23%, and that was met for fiscal year 2013. For women-owned businesses, it's 5%, and unfortunately that goal has never been met, ever. So there's some work that needs to be done there to help our women-owned businesses. Small disadvantaged businesses, that's currently those 8A certified companies. The goal is 5%, Hub Zone 3%, and service disabled veteran businesses 3%. So for fiscal year 2013, all of the actual utilization percentages increased except for the Hub Zone firms. That did go down, and as I said, I'm sure it's because a lot of firms could no longer keep their Hub Zone certification. Any questions on the contracting goals? Okay. We're going to move into some slides that talk about how the government does business. And this first slide has to do with the methods by which it does business. And we usually, for training purposes, divide it into the 3 categories: micro purchases, simplified acquisitions or procedures, and formal or large contract procedures. And there's actually slides for each of these. I'll give you the heads up though. Micro purchases, as I said, these are purchases that are less than $3,000. This is a category where it's what we call unrestricted competition. Anybody at all can get those contracts or purchase orders, whatever, from the government. The simplified acquisition procedures, this is for acquisitions between $3,000 and $150,000. And that's the sweet spot for small businesses, because it's this category here, the $3,000 to $150,000, that those are normally reserved for small businesses. And then lastly, the formal or large contracts, this is where you get into the set-asides. They're generally contracts over $150,000. So how do these methods work? Well, for the micro purchase level, the 0 to 3,000, it's usually just a purchase made with a government purchase card or a government credit card. And like I said, this is unrestricted. Anybody at all can just, somebody that works at an agency could call up and place an order and use a government credit card. The $3,000 to $150,000 range, this is where a purchase order many times would be issued, or what we call an unpurchased purchase order if they don't know in advance what the total would be exactly. Blanket purchase agreements, impress funds are petty cash. And for this level, you're talking a request for quote or a request for information. For the contracts over $150,000, this is invitation for bid, where there's a sealed bid situation. And again, the lowest bidder, who is considered fully responsive and responsible, is awarded the contract. Requests for proposals. This is where it's not, again, just price. These are contracts that are actually negotiated, and price and other factors are taken into consideration. And then many of you probably have heard about what is called the Consolidated Purchasing Programs. The GSA contracts fall under this. You can see some of the acronyms here for some of the terms for those purchasing programs. And these are for very, very seasoned government contractors. You really have to have a lot of good experience in contracting to be able to get, for instance, a GSA, a General Services Administration contract. This would be similar or similar to our New York statewide contracts. Now here are the thresholds. You could see the categories that we've been talking about. I put a note in here that another update that I need to get out to all of you is that every 5 years the thresholds are reviewed and usually increased, again, for inflation reasons. And so this coming year, at some point, these thresholds probably will change. So I will let you know when they do. But right now, these are the different categories. For construction contracts over $650,000 or $1.5 million for construction, those contracts, if they're to a large business, they have to have a subcontracting plan. So they have to show that they are going to do business with small business concerns. And this is why the prime contractors, the large businesses, that's why they need the small businesses. They need to do business with them because they are required by the FAR to do so. And then our last slide for federal is just wanted to recap again what those categories are when contracts are set aside for a certain group. And they can be a total set aside where only that group can get the contract, or it could be a partial set aside. But if it's a total set aside, then the rule of 2 comes into play. And that means that the contracting officer first has to have determined that there are at least 2 firms that are likely to bid. So as long as they've done that research and they know that there's a potential for 2 or more, they can set it aside for one of these different groups: service-disabled veterans, hub zone firms, 8A firms, or women-owned firms. So any questions on the federal side? That's the overview for federal contracting. Now we'll move to state. And I'm going to start out with the definition of what a small business is for New York State. Employs 100 or fewer people, resident in New York State, independently owned and operated, and not dominant in its field. So very similar to the federal side, except for that 100 or fewer employees. If you have a client who's new to government contracting, Empire State Development developed this wonderful resource, Doing Business with New York State, and you can send the link to a client. I've actually printed this out, even though it's probably 20 or 25 pages. It's an excellent resource for clients new to government contracting. Great, great. Very basic, very easy to understand, and easy to read. For New York State contracting, we always just talk about certainly the New York State Contract Reporter. And we had done a webinar at last year's all-staff training on the Contract Reporter because it was totally revamped a year ago, totally re-engineered, totally different. So we did that at last year's all-staff training. We're going to do that webinar again next week, January 14th. So if you need a refresher on that, we'd love to have you join us. But this is online current opportunities posted by all types of federal entities, federal agencies, New York State agencies, New York State authorities, public benefit corporations. If the contract is expected to be $25,000 or higher, or is it 50? I'll have to go back. I'm sorry, I've got to look at the thresholds on that. But a client that is interested in contracting at the state level definitely needs to register at this website here and get a free login and password. They can set up for free e-alerts and review postings in many categories. And there's a lot more at the Contract Reporter that we'll talk about next week. There's a business registry that the business can sign up so that others can find them. There are procurement forecast reports available. So there's quite a bit there. There's archives so that somebody can take a look. I get the question a lot of times, and I'm sure you probably do too. Is there a need for what my client offers? Is there a need for this widget, or is there a need for this particular service? And I always tell people, chances are yes, but to know exactly, we have to do the research. At the federal level, we've got to go in and run a report to see, if contracts have been given for that particular product or service. And the same on the state side. You can go into the Contract Reporter and pull up a link for the archives and search by a keyword and see, what has been posted in the past. So the other thing here on the slide, the Office of General Services, these are the statewide contracts. So again, this is for a company that's very well established, because a company that's fairly new is probably not going to be able to meet the criteria for a statewide contract. But when a client gets a statewide contract, then they're pre-approved, the pricing's already been determined, and any state entity, person, a buyer, can just call up and place an order. They don't need to go through the procurement process of posting. So we'll talk more about this. There's a webinar for this as well on January 28th, and we'll go into it in detail. There's an order of procurement in New York State, and the first step is to do business with the the Central Association for the Blind and Disabled, but then the statewide contracts. So a lot of clients, are very interested in getting on a statewide contract, and it can be very beneficial to them. But there's a lot to it. So we'll talk more about that at that webinar. I should note that clients that are set up in bid links, they still need to get set up with the Contract Reporter, because the Contract Reporter does not share its information with any bid matching service, like bid links or any other bid matching service. They don't share their postings. So if a client really wants to get New York State covered, they need to review the Contract Reporter and be set up in bid links as well. Here is the website for the Minority and Women-Owned Business Development, the Empire State Development website, and this could be helpful to our minority and women-owned firms. The New York State contract system just is about a year old, I think, now, and this is New York's way of trying to streamline procurement. It's at this website that someone can apply for certification as a minority or a woman-owned firm. They can recertify, they can update their profile, they can access the statewide MWBE directory here. They also can access bid and grant opportunities. That does link up with the contract reporter and OGS. And now we're going to move to marketing, but any questions on New York State contracting? Okay. Well, these are just some steps to think about when you are working with a client. Number one, help them to complete any registrations or enrollments. So SAM website if they're interested in federal opportunities. There's a Vet Biz registry if they're interested in registering as a veteran-owned business. The contract reporter, certainly they'll want to register there. And then you want to talk with the client about whether or not they qualify for any of those preference programs, those socioeconomic programs, such as, veteran-owned business, woman-owned business, because that would let you know whether or not you need to give them information on, say, a HubZone firm or 8A certification. And then the client and you will want to work together on preparing some marketing materials. So there's something called a capabilities sheet or statement that's just a one-page summary of the business, and that's used for proactive marketing. And certainly, looking at business cards to make sure that they're, up to date with all, the right information and certifications, etc. But focusing on any unique capabilities that the company has. So what really differentiates your client from others that are in that same line of business? And last but not least, work with the client on a marketing plan, because I've learned from experience. I used to, when I first started, I'd go over with clients, federal contracting, state contracting. I'd really try and give them a lot of information, and it was really just too much. So now I've learned that you take it, what's that joke, how to eat an elephant one bite at a time. Now I take it more step by step with a client, and I say, okay, let's get you set up in bid links so we can kind of gauge right away what opportunities might be out there for you. But then let's take a look at maybe state contracting and see what's available at the state level. And come up with a plan for how are you going to go forward to help that client get contracts. Letting the client know that it takes quite a while, quite a long time, to be honest with you, to get that first contract. I was told when I started, plan on a year. And now I've read other articles where, it could be 1 to 2 years before your client gets that first contract. So the client has to really be dedicated to pursuing this marketplace. If they want to get into selling to the government, they really have to be committed. I had one program one time where I had a slide in there. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And that's just so true. So coming up with a plan for how the client's going to go forward, maybe having some sort of a tracking spreadsheet to keep track of the marketing efforts, determining a marketing budget. Some clients, they don't really have the time to devote a whole day a week to this. They can maybe designate an hour or two on a Friday, say, for pursuing government contracts, and that's fine. So we take our cues from the client and let them kind of show us, how quickly they want to move. Right? Some clients are really, really motivated to move quickly, and others not so much. So one of the things that we really have to help them with is to identify who buys their product or service. And that does involve a little bit of research and doing some reports to see who's bought our client's product or service in the past. But once we know that, then that's very valuable information, because you don't want to target the whole Department of Defense. You want to narrow it down to, is it just one, particular branch. And that federal procurement data system I mentioned earlier is very valuable because when you want to report by a NAICS code, it'll give you the top 10 agencies that have awarded contracts for that NAICS code. And so a lot of times the DOD will come out on top there, and then you need to drill down a little bit. But this is very valuable information, because then let's say that you've determined that it's the U.S. Air Force that you want to target. Well, then you can really go into their website, establish a relationship with their small business specialist, their Office of Small Business programs, look at their procurement forecast. There's so many things you can do, but you first really have to narrow it down. So obviously being reactive is very important. Getting signed up in bid links to react to current postings, but we always recommend being proactive as well. And so this means, actually marketing the firm. And they'll definitely want to market to, government buyers and these other people that I've mentioned. And just try and, it's not easy, but establish a relationship. And so there's different ways to do that. You can certainly, one big way is by attending procurement events. So I'm going to be getting out an email shortly with the big regional matchmaker events, a save the date. If you want to take a note now, the Watertown 1 matchmaker will be March 24, the Buffalo matchmaker May 13, and the Albany matchmaker June 23rd. So I'll get that out in an email, but definitely these are events that if there's a way for your client to be able to attend, they certainly might want to consider it. Certainly looking at who's going to be there and if there's a fit for what the client does. There are many, many other events as well besides those three that I just mentioned. Certainly the annual MWBE Forum in Albany in October is a huge, huge event. And there's others as well. The Department of Defense, not DASNY, it's now the MWBE Forum, but there's many different procurement events that are scheduled. And I always tell people when they're preparing for these events, one of my favorite things to tell them is to remember that quote, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Our client needs to also focus on the customer and not here's what I can do, but here's what I can do for you. What problems or challenges the client can solve for the government customer, for the government buyer. So they have to kind of look at it from that angle, because that's what's going to, help them get in the door. And certainly, I can't stress enough, bid links really, really helps the client, because there's over, last I looked, 87,000 agencies at the federal, state, and other levels. And there is just no way for us or for our clients to review all of those different agencies. And so bid links makes it easy, especially if you narrow down your search quite a bit and make it very, very targeted. We've got quite a few we're going to be contacting you about. There's many, many bid links clients who are getting more than 200 bid matches a day, which is too much. That really needs to be narrowed down. So we'll be talking with you in the months ahead to work with your clients, those that are getting too many, and because this is just too overwhelming for the client when they're getting that many bid matches. A couple resources for you, these last two slides. The SBA has an actual government contracting classroom, and this is absolutely wonderful because the client can take, and you too, can take courses and workshops online. There are many. There's when I started a few years ago, there were just, I think, 3 different courses. I did them in a weekend, and now there's just so many that the SBA has developed in the last few years that this is something to make your clients aware of. and for you to take advantage of as well if you're looking for professional development opportunities. And then the Department of Defense has two great handouts. I can't show you the whole handout. I can just show you the top here. But I've given you the link to go in and be able to print off these. So for any client that is interested in federal contracting, these are just fabulous handouts because they go over many of the things that I just briefly touched on this morning. They go over, and it's very, very nicely done handouts that you can give your client and make a little packet for them before they leave your office. Certainly, in addition to these two handouts, these are just one-pagers, front and back. You certainly want to give them our procurement services brochure and our bid links brochures as well. And then this is just a recap of all of our acronyms that were in the program today and my contact information. And I am here for any questions that you have. Does anyone have any, Kathy, that they've typed in or raised their hand?
I have not seen any. Does anyone have any questions? Speak now or contact Roxanne later. All right, I guess you were, oh wait, we do have a question. No, we have a thank you. You're welcome, Kathy.
You know what I will say while we're waiting to see if anybody has any last minute questions? This is a webinar that I've done as an actual presentation for people coming to a workshop. We have a 20-hour course that we offer to small businesses, and many times in the past I've done this as a 1-hour segment. Now what I've done, because we get so many startups in that class, I've now I just take 10 or 15 minutes and I make these people that come to our workshop, and I know all of you have similar programs at your own center, I take 10 or 15 minutes prior to the marketing segment, and I talk about how the government is a market that they will definitely want to consider, you know, in the future once they get established and get going and all. And I, you know, certainly give them my card and our procurement brochure, our bid links brochure, and let them know that we are here and that this is a service that we offer, and not to diminish the PTACs, but to work with the PTACs. You know, if they're coming to us for small business counseling for whatever, you know, we always want to make sure that they know that this is an area too that we offer to them, that they don't have to travel maybe, you know, whatever to get to a PTAC, that we can help them. And I know we have many people who are new, who are just starting to tip their toes in, you know, the procurement waters, and that's why, you know, I've really dedicated, you know, 10 webinars between now and the end of April to help you. But I'm here to work with anyone, you know, one-on-one.
We do have a question, Roxanne.
Sure.
Approximately how long does it take to register a company on bid links?
Good question. Bid links, it doesn't take long at all. Now that Pam, our office manager here, and I, we're the bid links people, and I've trained her on how to enter them for me. But now that we, you know what we're doing, I can get a client set up in bid links in about 15, 20 minutes for initial setup. So that's, you know, entering in the basic information about the company and entering some keywords for their search criteria. The important thing is getting the right search criteria. But I always tell clients that, you know, it's a work in progress. We can keep tweaking it. So for someone who's brand new, you know, it might take a half an hour till they really get to understand, you know, get used to all the different fields that need to be populated. But what I have on my to-do list, I'll give everybody this heads up, is Jim King actually made the suggestion to me to maybe think about having a form that we could give to people that has all of the required information that we need to enter, because a lot of the centers are going to be kicking off their contractor training, bond readiness training programs in the spring, and we want to get all of those people on BidLinks. So we're thinking of maybe developing a form, and that would make it easy because the client would just fill in their information, and then we could take it and enter it in BidLinks at any time. So that's something that I definitely want to pursue, but it's not a difficult thing at all, you know. And as soon as you get them entered, they start getting a daily email the next day. So if you set them up on Thursday, boom, Friday they get their first email, and they absolutely are thrilled. I just had a client this morning come in, and he gets quite a few. And I said to him, "Is this too many?" And he said, "No, I go through them all." He likes getting all that he gets. But I do encourage people, and I recognize too that we need more training on BidLinks. So, Kathy, you and I will work on that for the future. More trainings, more webinars.
Sounds good. Roxanne, there's another question. On the federal side, is there a MWBE checklist that is from start to finish on regarding what's required for paperwork to be certified?
Well, for the federal side, there isn't MWBE. So when you say MWBE, that's usually talking about New York State. MWBE, again, for others, is minority and women-owned business enterprise. At the federal level, for minorities, it's the 8A certification. So if they would go to that website, the SBA website for 8A Business Development Program, they'll get a lot of information on how to get certified as an 8A firm. It's an online application followed up by documentation similar to like the New York State process. But that's what a minority would do. For a woman, it used to be, up until just recently, that they would self-certify as a woman and then upload some documents to an SBA website. However, that's in the midst of changing. And for a woman, for federal contracting, they're now going to be required to have a formal certification. So what does formal certification mean? They're going to have to be certified by a federal agency, state government, or a national certifying entity approved by the administrator, which right now there are 4 that are approved. And so they too, for women now, they were going to have to get a formal certification, which this is a new thing. But it just, President Obama just signed a bill called the National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, and he just signed that in the middle of December. And it made that change for women business owners. So I need to do more research on this, and I will get more details out as I can get them determined. I'm actually, our SBA Syracuse District Office is actually working with SBA National Headquarters to get some of my questions answered on this. So any other questions, just please email me and I'll do the research.
All right, do we have any other questions? I'm not seeing any more come in, so we will go ahead and wrap things up. And thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you again, Roxanne, for sharing all your knowledge. And I'm getting some nice comments from people coming in. Thank you, and this was great. So this will end the webinar for today. And again, this was recorded and will be put in MQS.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.